today one would expect, how, Fox News is going to support the Republican in office. And so it's not a breaking news that Fox had mobilized, to support George Bush. But it is actually interesting that the other major cable news networks, MSNBC and CNN, were actually mobilizing just as ferociously. And at one point, there had been a story broke, and I think the New York Times broke it. So, it's not to say that they didn't have reporters who are gumshoeing and writing things that didn't line up, but they broke the story about the message force multipliers, which were, former retired generals who had been working and getting paid by the Pentagon to spread the word about the war and on a day-to-day basis. And those generals, they would get their briefing at the Pentagon, and then they would go and be, talking heads on CNN and MSNBC and Fox. None of these programs had bothered to suss out that perhaps these generals were working on behalf of the Pentagon, and that and they weren't independent pundits, that they were actually getting paid to toe a line. So, the Pentagon took advantage of the fact that these cable news makers or news companies programs weren't doing their due diligence, and they weren't asking for any transparency. And so, so the Pentagon found a way to exploit that. And these cable companies were just take on board these generals, and they call them message force multipliers. And so shame on them, and they never apologized for any of this. And they continue to have former generals on, like McChrystal and Petraeus